Hi folks, this is Karim Rao from IT Visualizer channel. Today we'll continue our lab, the Mass Effect lab. This is the fourth video. We have been discussing in the previous video the following. We have been working with creating group policies. First of all, what is a group policy? A group policy, it is a centralized tool provided by the Active Directory, so you can control most of the Windows setting or all of the Windows setting on all of the PCs in the domain. For example, if you need to force a certain background and the screensaver and the theme and the lock screen to be applied to all of the PCs in the domain, for example, if you have 300 PCs, you need all of them to have a certain background and the screensaver and the theme and the lock screen. All of this can be done through the group policy. Okay, and we have been discussing a couple of group policies to be applied. We have 7 group policies in the lab to be applied. Also, one of the functions of the group policy, as I said before, it is a centralized tool to control all of the Windows setting on all of the PCs in the domain. For example, we need in this lab to force the use of the BitLocker, okay, program on all of the programs in the domain. This also will be done using a group policy. Okay, so let's revise what we have been discussing in the previous video. We will said before, or as I said before in the previous video, we have 7 group policies. Default to domain policy is the first one. Default to domain policy, it is a policy, okay, the policy that will be applied to all of organizational units. It is the general rules to be applied to all of the Active Directory objects or all of the domain. For example, what is a general rule? I mean, general rule, for example, if you need all of your users to have a certain criteria for the password. For example, if you need the password in the Active Directory to be more than 7 characters, you need it to be complex. This can be done through the default domain policy, and this default domain policy it is general rules. It applies to all of the different Active Directory objects. For example, if you have an IT user, this criteria of password will be applied to him. If you have an HR user, it will be applied to him as well. All of the users in all of the departments, or all users will apply this password policy, will be applied to them. So this is a general rule, or this is when you should use or should configure the default domain policy, when you need to have a general setting to be applied to all of your Active Directory objects. And this is, by the way, when you install the Active Directory, this is created automatically for you, so you don't need to create it. Okay, so we will use the default domain policy to set a certain password criteria for the Active Directory users. We will use the default domain policy to force a certain background, lock screen and screensaver to all of the PCs in the domain. We will use the default domain policy to rename the local administrator account, and we will set a password for it. For example, we have said that when you install any Windows operating system on any PC, there is a default username created for you, which is called administrator. This administrator has full rights on the Windows operating system, and this is a security breach. Okay, so most of hackers know that Windows have a default user account named administrator, and in most cases this user doesn't have a password, so the hacker can use it easily. So to make it more difficult for the hacker, we will change it from administrator to any other name, for example X, and we will put a strong password on it, and then we will disable it. We will disable it completely, and we will create another user, and we name it Y, and we will give it the privileges of the administrator. As I said before, the administrator has full control over the Windows operating system, so we will rename it to X, and then we will give it a strong password, and then we will disable it, and then we'll make another user named Y, and we will give it the same privileges of the administrator. Okay, this can be done through the default domain policy. The default domain policy will change all or rename all of the local administrators on all of the PCs in the domain, and it can disable it as well. So the default domain policy, we will apply certain backgrounds, screensavers and lock screens. We will apply a certain password policy. We will disable and rename the administrators or local administrators accounts. We will have a welcome message also will appear if any user is accessing the domain or using his Active Directory user account to access a certain PC in our domain, it will give him a welcome message. This also will be done through the default domain policy. So the default domain policy, it is the general rules, or when you should set it up or configure it, when you need to apply certain general rules to all of your domain, all of your users, all of your PCs. So this is the general rule policy. Then we have something called mapping policy. Here we will make department shares, and then through this mapping policy we will map this department shares as network mapped derived. It will have certain names and will give it will be given a certain letter. Okay, we can go to this we can go to a certain graph just to remember. So here, for example, what is a department share? A department share, it is simply you have your domain controller, okay, and you install a server or service called file server. Okay, what is the function of this file server? It is simply a centralized location. You in this centralized location you tell the users to put their important data on it, or put your important data on this centralized location. Let's be more specific. What is the centralized location? It is the hard disk. So you have your domain controller, you install file server role on it, and after that you take a part of the hard disk, okay, and create folders on it, and then users should, or every department should have a folder for it, and this folder, it is created for them so they can put their data on it. Let's make it more simpler. If you have let's consider this as a bank, and this hard disk is saves, okay, or let's consider this as a bank, and then these folders, they are safes. So we are telling the users to put their important data in these safes. Okay, so let's return to our example. Here we will have our domain controller, we will install file server on it, we will take a part of the hard disk of this file server and create folders on it. Every department will have a folder, and then a folder to put its important data on it, and then we will share these folders. Why we will share these folders? Because the different departments will not be able to access the folders that I have created for them to put their important data on it from their PCs unless they are shared. Okay, this is something like sharing a post in Facebook. No one will see your post unless it is shared. So we will create folders, we will share them, and then we will specify certain Active Directory group to access this share folder. So the IT group, or Active Directory IT group, will access the IT shared folder. Okay, the HR group will access the shared HR folder, and so on. So this is good, but we need to control what this group will do to this shared folder. So we can control it using two permissions, or two type of permissions, something called SMB share permissions and NTFS share permissions. Okay, for example, if we go to the IT folder, I need the IT folder. What they do on this folder, they can have full control on it. So they can create subfolders, they can create files, they can delete files, so they have full control over the shared folder. This is full control when using SMB share permissions, and this is full control when they use NTFS share permissions. So why we use two types of permissions that they are exactly the same, or they act the same function? Because as you see, the two permissions are identical. This is full control and this is full control. So why we use two instead of one? This is like having a safe with two keys. So it is more safe to have a safe, or to have a safe with two keys instead of one key. Okay, so here, for example, if you go to the HR folder, I need the IT group, or the Active Directory. So here we have the IT group. Here, as we said before, we will have the IT group to access this share folder, and then we will specify what they will do in this share folder by the permissions. Okay, so the IT group will have full control. As for example, the HR folder, we will give the IT group full control from SMB and NTFS share permissions, and then we will give the Active Directory HR group a change and modify permissions on the shared folder. Modify and change, these two permissions have the same function. So modify, it is equal to change in SMB share permissions. So when you put change in the SMB share permissions, you need, or if you need to have an equivalent, or you need to have a same permission that have the same function, you need to go to the NTFS share permissions and choose modify. So modify and change are the same. Okay, so here we will give an IT full control in both share permissions, and then we will give the HR group modify in the NTFS, and then change in the SMB share permissions. A change is less in permissions than full control. So modify, you can do everything except deleting, for example. This is an example. So we cannot give them full control, because full control they can delete the folder as a whole. So we will give them less than full control permission, give them modify. Okay, so this is basically the process. It is a department share or a share. It is a part of the hard disk of the file server. We give it to the users or share it to the user so they can put their important data on it. They can access this space on the hard disk from their PCs, okay, remotely, okay, or from their PCs. So they are sitting on their PCs, and this space on the hard disk of my server will be available to them. Okay, so how we will do this? We will do this using a script. How we will do it? We will create a main folder. This will be called department shares, and then we will use a script to create the folders. Every department will have a folder, and then after that we will have an SMB share permission script. This script will share the folders, so it will share the HOD, the IT, and the HR, and the global share, and then it will begin putting different permissions on the different shared folders. For example, here the IT shared folder, it will have SMB share permission full control. Here the HOD department or the HOD group will have change permission on the HOD shared folder. Okay, so this it will share the folders. We will give different SMB share permissions on the different folders, and it will do something important. It will remove the everyone group from the SMB share permissions. By default, when you share any folder, there is a group on the shared folder named everyone. This group have full control. It will have full control over the folder. Okay, so we don't need this group, because everyone, it is a group that contains all of the users in the Active Directory. So we don't need the HOD to have full control over the IT, and we don't need the HR to have full control over the HOD. If you have everyone over all of the shared folders and they have full control, this will mean that every department can go and access the other department share. Okay, so the SMB share permission will share the folders. It will give certain SMB permissions on certain folders, and it will remove the everyone group from the share folder permissions. Okay, so this will be done using the SMB share permissions, and then we will use an NTFS share permissions to give the blue ones. So we will have, let's from the beginning, we'll have a main folder. We will have a script to create the department folders, and then we will have an SMB share permission to share these folders and give SMB share permissions on it, the green ones, and remove the everyone group from the share permissions. And then we use an NTFS share permission and give the blue ones on the shared folders. Okay, this is basically the process. At the end, what we will do at the end, let's see here, at the end, when this is widow, this is a user in the Active Directory. This is she is a member of the Active Directory HR group. So she needs, when she logs in with her Active Directory user, she needs the department share of the HR to appear for her as a mapped drive with the name of HR and M. Okay, so, and also by the way, I need this share folder to have a limit. For example, in this share folder you have a limit of 10 gigabytes. So the users of the HR can put in their department share, or the folder that I have given them to put their important data on it, I limit it to only 10 gigabytes. This will be done through something called Qouta. We will discuss it in this lab. So how we can do this? We have created the department share. We have given the right permissions to the right groups on it. How we can have this map network drive appear for the HR user? This will be done using a mapping policy. Okay, so we will have the department share. This is the path of the share, and then we will give it a letter, and then we will specify that this mapped drive will be accessed for certain Active Directory group. So this is done using the mapping group policy. We have discussed this in the previous video, and then we were discussing something called a WSOS policy. Also, I can go and show you all what is the WSOS policy. Okay, here the WSOS policy. Let's go here. It's the WSOS. Okay, WSOS explained. Okay, and then we will go here and we will have the other WSOS. Okay, so basically what is a WSOS? WSOS is something called Windows Server Update Service. What is the function of this role or this service? First of all, let's have a scenario. You have in your DSL or at home, you have 4 PCs. 2 of them have or 4 laptops, 4 PCs and laptops as you like. Okay, so 2 of them have Windows 7 and 2 of them have Windows 10. So you need to update the operating system for the 4 PCs. So what you will do, you will access every PC and go to the control panel, then Windows Update, and then you will begin through the Windows Update option searching for updates. How this will be done? The PC will go and access the internet and goes to the website of Microsoft and search for its operating system updates. For example, this PC will search for Windows 10 updates. It will get it through the internet and download it, and the same applies for the other PCs. Okay, this process, it is multiple updates. In this, for example, we have here 4 PCs, they will update at the same time, so we have 4 connections or 4 download sessions. This will be done at the same time. So if you have an internet line, your internet line will be consumed. And there is another problem. This Windows 10 update will be downloaded twice, so because you have 2 PCs having Windows 10 updates, so you will repeat the download 2 times. This is time consuming and hard disk consuming, because you can, if you have the option, you can download the update on one PC, for example, and you can then download it, and then you can install it on the other one, so you don't need to download the same file twice. So this is time consuming and hard disk space consuming. Okay, and a lot of internet bandwidth used. This is when you have a work group, or you are at home, for example, you have a DSL connection or something. In our domain, we will have our install the WSOS server role or service on the domain controller. This will have or will centralize the distribution of the Windows update. I will discuss it. First of all, we will have our domain controller, we will install WSOS server on it role. Then the WSOS will go to the internet and check for the different updates for the different operating system. It will download it on its hard disk, okay, and then it will distribute this Windows update to the different PCs with their different operating system. Okay, so here we have a lot of advantages. Here, for example, we have only one download session. Here we have multiple download sessions. Here we guarantee that the updates will not be downloaded twice, because the server downloads them all and then he will distribute it. And we can also guarantee that the download time, or the time that this server will download the updates, will be for example at midnight, when these PCs are not working. So here we have one centralized location and one download session and less internet bandwidth consumed, and this server will be responsible for distributing the updates to the different PCs. How these PCs will know that they need to communicate with the WSOS server to get their operating system updates, other than going like in our previous example, going by themselves and downloading the updates by themselves? This will be done using a group policy. So we will have a group policy. In this group policy, we will tell the different PCs and servers with the name of our domain controller that has the WSOS server service installed on it. So we'll give them the WSOS server name and IP address, so they can go and communicate with it to get their operating system updates. Okay, so this is basically what is a WSOS server. Okay, so this will be the name of the server or the IP of the server. this will be configured through the WSOS policy, and it will be distributed to the clients so they can know, or they will know that they need to communicate with the WSOS server named so and so and IP, so they can get their operating system updates. This is not only the thing that we will configure in this WSOS policy. We will configure another thing concerning the way the updates will be downloaded and installed and the PCs to be restarted. Okay, so for example, I need to show you all also another example or another graph. Here when we are working, or when we were talking about the situation when we have your DSL at home and PCs are trying to access the internet to download the updates. What we will do, for example, if I need to update this PC, what I will do, I need to go to the control panel and then go to the Windows updates and tell him to check if there is updates, and if he finds any updates, I need to click on download, and then after downloaded I need to click on install, and then at the end, if the PC needs to have a restart, I need to click restart. All of this will be done through the user, so the user input is needed. Okay, in a domain I don't need this to be happening, or this should not be happening, because the user maybe he is not or he is busy and he doesn't have any computer, or he doesn't know how to do this process, or he is not an expert. So maybe at home you have the knowledge to do this, to how to install and download Windows updates, but maybe the user here, for example an accountant, doesn't know this information. So we will configure in the group policy or the WSOS group policy to tell the PCs with the WSOS IP and name so they can get their updates, and we will configure the updates to be downloaded and installed and the PC to be restarted automatically. Okay, so all of this will be done by the group policy. The group policy will tell the computers, okay, this is my 2 organizational units that will contain my Active Directory computer objects. Okay, I will apply this group policy on them. So the group policy will tell the computers and PCs with the WSOS IP and name, and it will configure the PCs, or it will tell the computers that they will not interfere with the process of the download and installation of the updates. This will be done automatically. So the user will sit on his PC, he will get the updates, it will be auto downloaded and installed automatically for him. Okay, so this will be done to the normal PCs or workstations, okay, through the group policy. This is not the case when you are working with a server, okay, because the server, it is, or its role, the servers basically its function is to have a service to be available 24/7. Why we for example have 2 type of PCs, something called workstation and something called server. Workstations are for normal operation, it can be available for a certain time or not, but as for the servers, it is more powerful than a workstation, and it basically its function is to be opened and available 24/7. For example, if we have our server domain controller and we have configured the same group policy as in the workstations, for example, if I told him to download the updates and install them and restart them automatically, so the server will be restarted automatically without my knowledge. This is a very critical issue, because this server can be a domain controller. So if the users are working or they have joined the domain, or they are connecting to the domain and it is restarted automatically, all of them will be down. Maybe this server contains an application that the users are working on it, so also if it is restarted without their knowledge or suddenly, this also will cut the communication between the users and the application on the application server. For example, a finance application, the finance team are working on it, so if I restarted the PC or the server without their knowledge, maybe their work on the financial application will be cut off and corrupted. So what we will do, we will have another WSOS group policy telling the server with the IP of the WSOS server, so he can get the updates for his operating system, and we'll tell him to only download the updates only download the updates, and me as an administrator will install and restart the server by myself. So this give me a space so I can talk to my users or workstations and tell them that, for example, at a certain hour I will restart the servers. So all of you should take caution and finish your work. If for example, the finance team, they need to finish their work on the finance application server, so I can restart it. And also the other users should finish their work at a certain hour. I will restart the servers on it. So this is a planned downtime. This will help us to control it and not to have any sudden cut off the service or cut off the operation, and the users will not be affected. So this is our two type of group policies. We will have a WSOS server policy and we have a workstation WSOS policy. The Windows server or the server WSOS server policy will be applied to the server's container or the server's organizational unit. This contains all my servers in it, and the other one will be applied to the terminals and robots. These are organizational units that will have my normal workstations in it, or the normal workstations objects in it. Okay, so let's get a little bit of a graph to finalize it all. So here for example, we can see that this is the WSOS server. He will download the updates and put it in the server hard disk, and through the group policy it will be the group policy will be pushed to the workstations. This group policy will tell the workstations the IP of the WSOS server and the port, and will tell them, this group policy will tell the workstations that the updates and the installation of the updates and the restart of the updates will be done automatically, and this will be applied. Okay, so this is for the workstations in the organization unit of terminals and robots. As for the servers, we have a different group policy. It will tell the servers with the IP of the WSOS server and the port, and it will tell the servers, or it will download the updates for the servers automatically, but it will leave the installation and the restart of the servers for the admin. Okay, so this will be done through two group policies. Okay, how this will be done, or through what group policy item? This is something called specify intranet Windows update services. This is the group policy that we will configure and put the server or WSOS server name and port on it, so the workstations and the servers can be able to communicate with the WSOS server and download their updates. And we have two different group policies. One will be configured for the workstations. This is called configure automatic updates. We will choose an option called auto download and install and schedule install. So this policy or this option will download, install and restart the updates for the workstations. As for the servers, we will configure the same one, which called also configure automatic updates, but we will choose a different option which is called auto download and notify for install. So this auto download and schedule for install, and the other it is auto download and notify for install. So this will only download the updates, and it will notify the administrator or notify the administrator to install and restart the server manually. So we have discussed this will be in the third group policy. And then we have two group policies concerning the classic shell. This is a program that changes the start menu of the Windows 10, which is like this, to a Windows 7 like type. These two group policies will control what is seen from this program. For example, for the IT, I have configured something called classic shell policy admin. It will open all of the options, different options for the IT in the classic shell program. As for the classic shell limited, it will hide some options in this program for the normal users. For example, I will hide the run, I will hide for example some icons on this program. Okay, and at the end we will have two group policies to enable, one for enabling USB and DVD for certain users, and other one to disable USB and DVD for certain users. Okay, How the group policy it is applied? You need to choose or to link the different group policies to the organizational unit. So this is the first thing, you need to link the group policy to the organizational unit that you need this group policies to be applied to, and to identify which type of objects in this organizational unit you need the group policy to be applied. For example, this organizational unit will contain the users of the IT, so this group policy will be applied to them, okay? And this users of the IT are in a group called authenticated users, okay? So what is an authenticated users? This is a default group, group Active Directory group that it is created automatically when you install the Active Directory. What is the members of this group? This is the members of this group. This are every user that was able to access the domain through a correct username and password will be added to this group automatically by the Active Directory. So here rises a question. Here not only the IT will be added to this group, but all of the Active Directory group, Active Directory users, the HR will be added here, the IT will be added here, the accounting will be added here. So that means that all of these group policies will be applied to this to all of the users. No, because there is two conditions. When you want to apply a group policy, you need to think in two conditions. First of all, the user, for example, if I user in the IT, I need to know if this or these three group policies will be applied to me, so I need to think in two things. Me as an Active Directory user of IT, is my user Active Directory user in this organization unit? This is number one, so we check it. Is my user in this group? Yes, it is, okay? So as me as an IT, I have my two conditions successfully applied to me. Okay, let's go to the HR. The HR user, Active Directory user, is he in the group of authenticated users? Yes, so we can check it. Then, is this HR Active Directory user in this organization unit? No, this doesn't apply, because this organization unit only contains the IT users, so it will not be applied. The HR will not apply, or it will not apply to him the three group policies, okay? So you need to have two conditions for every group policy. The group policy is linked to which organizational unit and which type of objects it will be applied to. It can be applied to users, to groups, to computers. And we have the different group policies here. All of them will be applied by the same concept, and we have a default controller, domain policy controller, or the default domain controller policy. This is this is created automatically by the Active Directory. This will be only applied to the domain controllers, okay? And then at the end we will apply two group policies to the organizational unit of users. So in this organizational unit we have a couple of users. We need to open the USB and DVD for them, and a couple of users to disable the USB and DVD for them. How we can control it? This organization unit will have all of the users in one place, okay? So how the group policy will know which to apply to it, or how the group policy will know which users to apply the group policy to? So this will be done through using security filtering. So we will have a group called DC Advanced, or Advanced Users and Default Users. In the Advanced Users Active Directory group, we will put all of the users we need the DVD and USB to be open to them, and we will link it to this group policy, and we will link it to the organizational unit. So this is two steps. We will link the group policy to the organizational unit, and then through this organizational unit we will filter the users, or we will specify certain users for this group policy to be applied to them using the group policy, okay? So we will apply the group policy to this organizational unit to a certain group of users, okay, through using the Active Directory groups. So this USB and DVD opening policy will be applied to a certain Active Directory groups, and this is the USB and DVD that it is disabled will be applied to a certain Active Directory group. The two users, or the two groups, or the two user members of, or the members of these different two groups are all in one organizational unit, okay? So this is basically the process or the group policy that we have been applied or discussing in the previous video. So, and we will discuss also, so sorry, let's go here to the group policy. This is the 7 group policies, okay. And also in the previous video we have been discussing how to make a home user folder. A home user folder, it is, or a user home directory, sorry, a user home directory. Let's return to this one. What is a user home directory? A user home directory, it is the same as the department share concept. So here we have in our the same file server, we have a domain controller, we have the file server installed on it, role, and we have a specific part of this hard disk. We will create for every Active Directory user a user home directory, or a folder for him that he can put his certain or private data on it. So we will have, for example, if we have 70 Active Directory users, we will have 70 folders created for them, okay. So how these users can access these folders that are remotely on the hard disk of the file server? Through sharing them. So we need to share them. After creating the folders, we need to share them, and then we'll specify every shared folder a certain Active Directory user will access it, okay. So this is basically or typically like the department shares. And also through the permissions we will control what this user will do on his shared folder. So every user will have full control on his folder. So Superman will have full control through using NTFS share permissions and SMB share permissions, and every user will have full control over his shared folder, okay. Here we have to take a note also, these folders also will specify a certain quota. So Karim, for example, on his folder or user home directory can put data until, for example, 10 gigabyte, for example. So he can't put more than 10 gigabyte of data on his folder, okay. So and also the folder will be named according, this user home directory folder will be named according to the Active Directory username, okay, of the user, okay. So my username, it's Kera01, so my user home directory will be named according to my Active Directory username, okay. So this is basically the process. So we have created the folders for the 70 Active Directory users, we have shared them, we have specified every user to access his certain shared folder of him, and we will control what this user will do using SMB and NTFS share permissions. This will be done using okay, a script. So we will have a main folder. This folder will have all of the user home directory folders created in it, okay. So the script, we need only to create the main folder, and the script will create the 70 folders for the 70 Active Directory users, and it will share them, and it will put and it will give every Active Directory user certain permissions on his folder, okay. So this will create the folders, share the folders, give the different Active Directory users different rights on their shared folders, okay. So at the end, after doing the script, if you go to the Active Directory user properties and the profile tab, we can see here in the home folder that the home folder will be mapped as a network drive called L, and the name of the user home folder or user home directory folder will be named according to the username of the user, okay. How we can see this? If we go to the Widow example, here we can see that, for example, this is Widow. She is an HR member or a member of the HR Active Directory group. So she can see her department share at a map network drive, and we can see here, for example, you can see a quota of 10 gigabytes. So she as a member can share the 10 gigabyte with all of the HR personnel. As for her, she have a private user home directory. This user home directory, it is limited to 2 gigabytes. It will be named according to her username of the Active Directory, and it will be mapped as an L drive. So this is basically what we have been discussing in the previous video. We have discussed the different group policies. We have created the department shares using scripts. We have created the SMB share permissions through the PowerShell scripts, we have created the NTFS share permissions using the PowerShell script. Okay, so the SMB share permissions and the NTFS share permissions will be added for both department shares and user home directory, okay, using scripts. Okay, and at the end we have created user home folder shares, and we use the scripts, and at the end we have a group policy to map the department shares as letters, and every department share will be accessed by the specific or its respective Active Directory group. So the HR will see the HR share mapped as an M, and the IT will see the IT share mapped as M. So all of this I think we have discussed in the previous video. This video we will discuss, we will create a DHCP server, and we will begin putting quotas. Okay, we have discussed this here. We can see, or as I said before, here in the folder I need to have the user home folders, the users to have only 2 GB quota to put, or 10 GB or 2 GB of data to be put on the user home directories, and for the department shares I need to be 10 GB. So this will be done using file server quota, and I need also to prevent users to put media files on either the user home directory or the department shares. This will be done using something called file screening. So through the file server role we will define a quota for both department shares and user home directories, and we will create file screening rules to block users from putting media files on both user home directory and department shares. So in this lab we will discuss the DHCP, how to configure it and what is DHCP, and how to create a file server quota and the file server screening, and we will begin creating a second virtual machine, and this second virtual machine will act as an MBAM or Microsoft BitLocker administrator and monitoring tool server. So we will create a second virtual machine to be a server or a server member, and on this server we will install the MBAM tool. So first we need to discuss what is a DHCP. Okay, so let's go here. First of all, it's called Dynamic Host Protocol. Okay, we have discussed before that for every PC, if you remember the graph, let me show you something. Network, we have said before in this example, if you need to have different PCs to be linked together or to be in one network and talk to each other and share things between them, share documents, share programs, anything, so you need first to have every PC to have a network card, and every PC need to have a unique ID which is called an IP address. Okay, so this unique ID, how it will be put on the PC, there is two ways. Okay, the first thing, or the first way, it is to put it manually. So for example, here is the PC. Okay, and what we will do, we will put it, or we will put the IP manually, or a static IP. Okay, so we put it by ourselves. How this will be done? Okay, we will go to the network connection of the, so we will access the PC like this one. Here we go to start, and then control panel, and then network and sharing connection. Okay, and then we will open the internet connection or the network connection, and then we'll go to the properties, and then we'll go to the internet, or this one, internet protocol version 4, and then properties, and then we will put the IP here. Okay, so we'll put the IP or the unique ID here in this place. Okay, so this is a way you can give the PC a unique ID through using this process by accessing the PC and going to the network connection and put the IP of the PC. So this is one way. So here, and we can put the DNS servers. We have discussed the DNS server. It is a way to simplify the communication between PCs in a network. For example, if you need to talk to another PC, you need to remember this IP address. So this is very hard thing to do, because you cannot remember a number like this. So the DNS, what you will do, this PC will have a name and it will have an IP. The DNS, when you want to talk to another PC, you just give him the name and he will give you the IP, and then you can talk to this PC. So it's an indirect way for helping you to communicate with the PCs through using the names, not the IPs. So here we can put an IP address, as I said before, through using the static way. This is another way. Or you can, as I said before, here is a unique ID, or every PC should have a unique number. By the way, this video or these slides are from a video in a YouTube channel called Power Cert Videos. This is very good channel that will contain a lot of useful information, and it's all through using animation or computer animation. So here, for example, we can see that every PC should have a unique ID or unique IP. What if there is two PCs having the same unique ID? So this will have a conflict or IP conflict, and the two PCs will be out of the network, or you cannot reach them, or they cannot share anything between them, or other PCs cannot communicate with them both. So this is a problem. Every PC should have a unique ID. So as for the DHCP, this is the second way. We can put IP to the PC through the static way by going to the network connection and putting the IP, or through using a DHCP. What is DHCP? You go to your domain controller and install the DHCP server role on it, and then basically when you power on the workstation, it will search automatically for the server or the DHCP server, and it will get IP from it, okay, automatically. So we can see this here. The DHCP will not give this PC automatically an IP address, but it will give it a subnet, a default gateway, and a DNS server. So it will give it a default gateway. This default gateway, it is the IP, or it is the name of the device that will get this PC out to the internet. The name and the IP, actually this is the IP of the gateway. Okay, so this IP, it is a number that will be given to the PC. So through this number, this PC can get out to the internet. This, by the way, it's the router, okay, if one of them knows, and it will give you the DNS server. So it will not give you only the IP address or the unique ID, but it will give you the subnet, the default gateway, the DNS. All of this will be done automatically. As soon as you power on this workstation, it will do something called broadcasting. What means broadcasting? It's something like yelling and saying, "Hi there. Is there anyone that can give me an IP?" So this is something called broadcasting. So when the broadcast reaches the DHCP, it will acknowledge that it is responsible for giving this PC an IP, and it will give it an IP address. Not only the IP address, it will give it a subnet mask, a default gateway, and a DNS server. Okay, this will be done automatically. So if you go and see, you can see that these two options in the network connection are called obtain IP address automatically. So this is the second way. You have the static way by going and choosing use the following IP address and put manually the IP, or choosing this option or the first option and configuring and installing the DHCP server role on the server, and then the IP will be distributed automatically, and the DNS server and the default gateway. So this will be done, okay, address request, and it will get an IP address. And then for example, I need to know, for example, if this PC got an IP address, how I can know or how I can see this IP address, because if you go 2 slides further, you can see that from this we cannot know if it's already got an IP address or not. So how we can do this, or how we can know that it's got an IP address? We go to the command prompt, okay, and we type this command. So here we can see that the DHCP enabled, it is yes, so the DHCP is already option, it is already activated, the IP is giving, and the different data, the default gateway, and so on. So okay, and okay, so when we configure the DHCP, we need to tell him to distribute, as I said before, from here the DHCP will give this PC an IP address. So for example, if we have 300 PCs, so we need to tell the DHCP what is or from to start from which IP and end to which IP. So for example, here we will have in the DHCP setting, we will tell him to start with the IP or start with the unique ID of, for example, 10.0.0.1 and end with the unique ID 10.0.1.100. So here you have 99 ID, okay, 99 ID to be distributed. Okay, so you have from 1 to 100, so you can have 99 PCs with 99 different IDs. This will be configured through the DHCP setting. When we configure the DHCP, this is called the scope. Okay, so here we will configure the scope. So here we have from 1 until what? Until 100 for sure. So all of these are numbers. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So all of these are unique IDs. It will be distributed to different PCs. As we can see, it's until 100. So we can see it's from 1 until 100. So you have 99 unique IDs. Okay, so there is something called leasing in the DHCP. What is leasing? It means that this IP address will be given to this PC for a certain amount of time. So why we use this kind of option? Why don't we leave this IP to be given to the PC forever, for example? This will be let's make sure that the DHCP server does not run out of IPs. For example, if you have, we said the scope will be from 1 to 100. What if for example you have 300 PCs, or let's say this, you have all of your IP or unique IDs are over, so you have 100 PC, all of them uses the IPs from, or the IDs from 1 to 100. Okay, so if you have the number 101 PC try to get an IP address, he will not be able to get it because all of the range are finished, all of them are distributed. So through the leasing, what we will do, we will give every PC this IP for a certain amount of time. Through this process, which is called leasing, we can guarantee, for example, if the 101 PC access or try to get an DHCP or try to get an IP address, maybe one of these PCs will be powered off. For example, if we have 100 PCs, all of them are up and running, okay, and they got IP addresses. Okay, so when this PC is powered off, okay, the IP after a certain amount of time will be released. Okay, so this IP address can be used again. So this PC, for example, will be powered off, or for example this IP this is powered off, so this IP after a certain amount of time of powering off, it will be released, so this IP will be available to another PC. Okay, so the DHCP server, it is called assigns IP through using called lease. The lease makes sure that the DHCP server does not be out of IPs. Okay, for example, here we can see that we have from 1 to 100. Let's see, or let's consider that we will only have 2 IPs. Okay, so not only 10. Okay, for here we can see that for example, this is 3 PCs. If you have a range from 1 to 3, so 3 PCs are in, they all took the 3 IPs, so the IP addresses are actually given to the computers and not leased. Let's here consider that it's not leased. These 3 PCs are up and running and they all got the IPs. Okay, so if a 4th PC, let's go here, if this PC are out, okay, and we don't have the lease option, so this IP is taken. Okay, it will not be given to any other PC again. Okay, and we have only 3 IPs. So if any PC comes here and try to get an IP, it will not work because we are not working with the lease option. Okay, so here we need, even this PC is out, we need to make sure that this IP attached to this workstation, it should be released. Okay, how this IP should be released? Through using the lease option in the DHCP. So by the lease, we are giving the IP for the PC for a certain amount of time. This certain amount of time will help us if this PC is out of the network or this lease time is ended, we can use the IP for another PC. So let's consider here another PC. Okay, here we can see that it will not, let's go there. So if we have another PC, it will not able to get this IP address because it's still attached to the PC if you are not using the lease option, and we are out of IPs because this is the last one. So this PC will not be able to get or to go to the network or to communicate with the other PCs because there is no IP available for it. Okay, if you are not using the lease option. But what if we are using the lease option? This will be different here. Okay, an address or renew. First of all, the IP will be released and renewed. Okay, so this, it is leased. Okay, so this is expired. For example, this is for 1 hour and it is released or it is out of the network. After that, what you will see that it will get an IP address because this is through using the lease option. Okay, so here this is why we use the lease. The lease will help us to use all of our IP ranges if we have a limited number of IPs. So now we can use them effectively. And then in the DHCP there is something called a reservation. If you need a certain IP to be given every time to the PC, for example, if you have a PC and its lease time is finished or its IP lease time is finished and you need it to get the same IP every time, so you can make it through something called address reservation. Okay, so this can be done. For example, I can tell him, for example, from here that this is IP, I needed to give it to my PC named so and so and the MAC address. We remember that the MAC address, it is the device that will able or will enable the different PCs to communicate with each other. Something like the phone, the telephone machine. You need to have a telephone machine so you can able to talk to other people, and the other people should have also a telephone machine. So the MAC address, it is the number or a unique number for the network card. Okay, so reservation shows specific computer or device will always be giving the same IP address. Okay, reservation typically to special devices or computers such as network printers, servers, routers, and so on. So DHCP is a server that runs on a server such as Microsoft server or Linux server. Okay, DHCP is a service that runs, as I said before, on a Microsoft server or Linux server. It's also a service that runs on routers. Okay, so this is basically the DHCP. And we have talked about the file server Qouta and the file server screening. Okay, we have discussed this. So let's go and see how we can implement this practically. By the way, it is best practice to install the file server not on a domain controller. So you can install it on anything except of a domain controller. So this is a best practice. But here, because my hardware resources are limited, so I am installing the file server on a domain controller. But if you have available resources or hardware resources, you can install the file server separately away from the domain controller. So here we open the server manager and then we will install the DHCP server. So here we'll go and install the DHCP from manage. I think we can go a little bit disposed. Okay, go to the manage and then add roles and features. So you will go to the manage and then add role and features and then next. next, and then next, and then we will add the DHCP, and then we will install the file server role feature, okay, which is named as file server resource manager. From this tool we will configure the file quota, okay, and we will configure the file screening option. The file quota is to specify a certain amount of data to be put on a folder, and for the file screening it is a rule to be applied to this folder, for example, to prevent users from putting media files on this folder. So we will configure this. Now we will configure the DHCP. Here we need to do something. Here it will need to something called authorize. So what we do, what we mean by authorization, here we are giving the right for this DHCP to give IPs to our PCs, okay. So if we don't do this process, the PCs will not be able to get IPs from the server. So we need to have an authorized server. So by the way, for example, if I am a hacker and I got a server, and this server I put IP addresses on it, okay, and they put it in your domain, so your users will get IPs from my DHCP, okay. This is a very critical method, or it's very or it is a security breach. So to make it, or to make a hacker not do this process, we will authorize our DHCP server, or we will give it an authorization. So if any PC try to get an IP address, he will check first if this DHCP server is authorized. So if it's not authorized, it will not get an IP address, okay. So it need to be authorized. We will authorize it using this on my Active Directory username. So it is authorized, and then we need to go to our custom console and add the DHCP console and the file server console to it. We have discussed before what is the custom console and what does it do. It is a custom window. I put all of my programs in it, so instead of running every program in a separate window, we will run it all, or we run all of them from one window with one console, okay. So instead of running every program with a separate window and a separate console, no, we will have one console with one window, all of the programs will run through it. So here we will add from snap, remove snapping, here we will add the DHCP, and we will add the file server role, okay. Next, and okay, then we will save it, and then we will have, or will begin configuring our scope. As we have seen in the graph, we need to tell the DHCP to distribute a number of IDs, and we need to tell the DHCP these IDs begin from what and end to what. So we will right click IP version 4 and tell him new scope, and we will name this new scope, give it a name, his mass effect, okay, universe ED terminals, okay. ED is the artificial intelligence of the Normandy ship, okay. Then we will tell him to begin from where and to end where. So we'll begin with 10.0. It's the best practice to give your workstations a range and your servers a separate range, and your servers, the IPs should be put statically, not dynamically, okay, not through DHCP. So you need to put the IP for your servers statically, okay, not through DHCP. And this is the subnet mask, so it will distribute the start and end. It will begin from 50 to 90, and the subnet mask will be this. So here it's telling us if you need to exclude or reserve, and then we need to configure it will default gateway. We don't have a gateway, we have a DNS, we have it already, and the wins. Okay, we'll tell them activate. So we have tell the DHCP to distribute these certain IPs. Just a moment. So let's continue. Here we are doing another thing. Here we will activate something called filters and allow and deny filter. Okay, what is an allow and deny filter? Through using the MAC address of the PC, as I said before, every PC should have a network card to be able to communicate with the other PCs in a network. This network card will have a unique ID which is called the MAC address. So through this option in the DHCP, we are allowing certain PCs with a certain network card that has a certain MAC address or a certain unique ID to get IP address from the DHCP. This is a very good way to control which PCs to get IP from your DHCP. For example, if you have 300 PCs in your network, you need to restrict your DHCP to give them only IPs, or to give them these 300 PCs only IPs. So if you have a foreign or have a strange PC that comes from outside, or a hacker, for example, he wants to get an IP address, this will not be available, because if you activate the option of filter, allow and deny, and put all of your 300 network card MAC addresses and names in this allow, so this will help you to restrict only your DHCP to give this PCs only an IP address. Okay, so we allow the allow and deny. For example, if you need to allow certain PCs to get IPs, you can do this, or you can deny some of them to get PCs, and the allow filter will work with the PC name and the network card MAC address. Okay, so this will work with the PC name and the network card MAC address of the PC. Here we will create a quota. We need the department shares. For example, for the IT, we need the IT personnel to put on the department share of IT to put only a quota or a certain limit of the data to be of total of 10 gigabytes. Okay, so this will be done using a quota. Okay, so here we will tell him create quota, and then we will have two options. Here we are choosing the quota will be 2 gigabytes, for example. Here we will this will quota be put on the user home directory. So here we will choose the limit of 2 gigabytes, and then we will choose, we have two options for the quota: create quota on pass and auto apply template, and create quotas on existing and new folders. What we mean by this? For example, we will put this quota on, or this limit on, the users folder. This users folder will contain all of my Active Directory home user folders. Okay, so by doing this and choosing the next option, here I am giving every Active Directory user a limit of 2 gigabyte on his user home folder. So every user will have 2 gigabyte of limit on his private or user home directory folder. This is the second one. And for example, if I create a new Active Directory user, this user will have his quota implemented on him automatically. Okay, so I don't need to create or to tell the file server to have a limit on newly created Active Directory users home folders. So it will give a limit, or it will put a limit on the existing folders, okay, or existing user home folders, and any new folders added, he will give them the same limit. It's 2 gigabytes. So this is the second option. What about the first option? The first option, for example, we will have a folder named department shares, and this folder will contain subfolders. Every department will have a subfolder to put its data on it. For example, if an IT, and I have a quota of my department share of 10 gigabyte, if me as Kareem put 5 gigabyte, so the other users in my department will have only 5 gigabyte remaining. So we are sharing the quota. So the department share, we have one quota and we share it all together. This is the first option. The second option, everyone will have a separate quota he can use. So we will see this. I can show you, for example, here we can get the graph. For example, here we can see that from this From this field we can see, for example, this is widow and this is the HR department chair. We have used what option? We will use the first option to create quota on pass. So we will have this option, or we will create a quota on the department chairs, and we will use the first option, which is create quota on pass. What we will do here, widow is an HR member and she have a department share quota limit of 10 gigabyte. Let's assume that she put 5 gigabyte. So if, for example, another user which is also a member of the HR department will see that the available limit for it will be 5 gigabyte. Okay, for example, let's consider we will have put 10 gigabyte file in this share folder. Okay, so no one will be able to put anything on the department share. This is the first option of how to create quota on pass. Okay, but if we choose this second one, which is auto apply template, this means that widow can use here 2 gigabyte. Okay, this is the second option. She can use it, and this is only for her. So if there is another user, well, for example, another HR department, he will have another 2 gigabyte available for her. So it's not shared. Everyone will have 2 gigabyte of limit. The other one, it will be shared. Okay, so we will do the second option to the user home directories. So we will specify it. So here, for example, let's go to the C and then the biochips. So the biochips, let's go here another moment. Again, so this is the user home directory folder. We can see here this is a whole user home directory folders. There is a lot of folders in it. So every user will be given, or every folder will be given 2 gigabyte quota. This is the option, okay, of auto template apply. So every user will be given 2 gigabyte. So this will be given 2 gigabyte, this will be given 2 gigabyte, this will be given 2 gigabyte. Okay, this is the first one. And then we will have for example, we will create another quota for the department chairs. This is for the user home directory. We will use the first option, which is create quota on pass, and then we will choose the data cube. Okay, let's go another moment. Again, so here we can see that we have put a limit of 10 gigabyte on this folder. Okay, so all the subfolders will share the quota on the main folder. For example, we have put on the data cube 10 gigabyte of limit, so all of the subfolders will share the 10 gigabyte of limit. So for example, if the Citadel folder put 10 gigabyte, so now this limit are finished. Or for example, if the Citadel put 5, then the other departments will share the remaining of the 10, which is 5 gigabyte. So this is the second option, which is create a quota on pass. So here we will give it 10 gigabyte. So one is sharing and the other is separate quotas. Okay, so here we can just pass this real quickly. Anyway, I think data cube. Anyway, I think we have done this. So now, no, sorry, we can go a little bit further again. Let's go this, and we will create the file screening option, which is to block no, I think we can go a little bit further because I have passed it real quickly. Again, no, again. So now we will go to something called file screening. We will create file screening. We will tell him to block media, audio and media files on the user home directory, okay, which is biochips. So it will block audio and video files on the folder and every subfolder under it, and also we will put the same rule on the department share main folder and any subfolder under it. Okay, so now we have created two file screening. So now we have finished the DHCP, we have finished the file server quota and file server screening. Now we will create our second virtual machine, which we will make it as or it will be a server, a normal server member, and we will install MBAM tool on it. So this will be the MBAM server. Okay, so here we will create a second virtual machine. Just we need to take the name of this virtual machine, so it will be EDMF2. This is the second server in our domain. This server will be a member server, or it will be an application server. This application server will have the MBAM software installed on it, okay, or the MBAM tool installed on it. And through this software we will control the BitLocker process on all of our 300 PCs in the domain. I think we can pause it. Okay, so now we will go and create new virtual machine, and then we tell him next. This is the name of the virtual machine. We'll call it EDMF02, and then we will have it at generation 1 and a dynamic memory. We have discussed this before in the previous videos. We will make it dynamic memory, and we put it on the switch we have discussed before, the internal switch, which called DC internal switch, and we will give it a hard disk of 200 gigabyte, and then we will put the DVD of the Windows Server 2019 on it. We have done this before in the beginning of the video, how to create a virtual machine and the different setting of this virtual machine and what does it mean. Please refer to my previous videos concerning this. Here we will check the integration services, guest service, and we will add another or a second network card, and put it on the same switch, and we will make teaming between these two network cards. And we have discussed before why we make teaming. We make teaming between two network cards to make redundancy, or to make sure that if one of the network cards is down, the network connection to the server will not be down. Here we will go to the DVD and add the Windows Server 2019 DVD, apply and OK, and then we will open or power on the virtual machine and begin installing. So let's go a little bit further. Anyway, so here we will go and begin the installation. So here we have we will install Windows Server 2019. Let's go a little bit further also. Here we will go there and again so here we will install Windows Server Data Center 2019. Tell him custom, and we will have two partitions, C and D. One will be 100 gigabyte and the remaining for 100 gigabyte also will be for the D. So we have C and D. One will be for the operating system and one for the normal data. And then we will format the second partition as NTFS. Okay, formatted NTFS, and then we will have the second partition next, and then we will begin installation of Windows. And as we have done in the previous videos, we will change, or we give the local administrator account for the Windows. We'll give it a strong password, and as I said before, we need to rename it and disable it completely and give another user the same privileges of this administrator. This is our security best practice from Microsoft. And then we need to do basically what we have done when we configured the first domain controller. We need to rename the PC to be EDMF02. We need to open the remote desktop connection service, okay, so we can able to remotely access this PC from outside, and we will specify that the remote connection will be only for authenticated users or for certain Active Directory users, certain Active Directory groups, okay, in our Active Directory. And we need to, of course, make the teaming between the two network cards, okay. As I said before, it is a redundancy, so if one of them fails, the network connection will not be down. And after that, we need to put an IP, or to give this server a unique ID through opening the network connection properties and add a static IP, okay, to the network connection or the network card. We'll see that one by one. Here first we will make some resolution setting. First we will personalize. I need this PC and the control panel and some icons to appear on the desktop. So we'll go to the personalize. I think we can pass it real quickly because it must take a little bit of time. So we'll go to the themes, okay, and then to the desktop icons, and then we will have this PC or computer and user files and control panel and network. So all of this will appear on the desktop, and then we will change the resolution just to make it as full screen. We'll just open the display setting and just make the screen more wider. Okay, and then we will change it to the resolution of my laptop, okay, or laptop screen. Then you can keep changes, and then we need to change the PC name. Okay, so we'll go to the local server, and we can open the remote desktop service, or you can change the name of the computer first. So you will change the computer name, and then we will make it or EDMF, okay, MF02, okay, and after changing the name and networking the network, teaming the network cards, the two network cards, and putting an IP address, we will join this server to the domain, okay. So here we have changed the name, but we need to restart, so this name will be in effect. Okay, we will start later, and then we will open the remote desktop. We will enable, or by enabling this service we can access this server from outside, and we will specify certain Active Directory groups to access this server from outside. This will be done through adding users to the Active Directory remote users group. Now we will have network teaming or network card teaming. We have done this, by the way, when we were installing the domain controller. Please refer to my second video in the series. So this is a repeated process. We have done it before, and we have discussed all of the options and setting in details. So here we will have the two network cards. They are working with 10 gigabytes as speed. So we will make the teaming between them, and we will give this teaming a name. We will use the address hash method and independent switch method. So we will have teaming mode as switch independent, and the load balance option to be address hash. As we said before, load balance, it is the way that he will distribute the load on these two network cards. So the two will work together, one will work and the other will be as a standby, or both will be working together. So it will be, I think the option, it will be working together. Okay, I think anyway. So now after teaming that, we need to put an IP address or put a static IP address in the network connection properties, because this is a server basically, or a best practice when you have a server that will be online or to be 24/7 available, you need to have a unique ID that is not changed. Okay, so this, or the best practice, you need to give your servers static IPs. Okay, as for workstations, you can work with the method of DHCP. Okay, so here we will go and put the IP network sharing, and then we will open the network teaming, then properties, and then internet protocol properties, and then we will put static IP address. This will be 10.0.1.21, and the subnet mask will be 255.255.255.0, and then we need to put the domain controller IP address, or the DNS, because the domain controller is acting as a DNS as well, so we need to put the IP of the DNS, which is also domain controller, which is 10.0.1.20, so this PC or this server can be able to join the domain. So now we will close, okay, and restart, so the name of the PC will be in effect, and join after that this server to the domain. So we'll make a restart. Okay, and Control Alt Delete, and then view, and then full screen, and then administrator. Okay, so now I need to close the server manager. I don't need to be added or to be opened automatically for me, because this takes from the RAM. So I will open it by myself, or when I need it I will open it manually. And then properties, we can see that the name is changed, and we need to join this server to the domain. So we will go to change setting, here we're just checking that the IP it is working and valid. You can see that the IP, it is valid and working. So now we will go and join this PC to the domain, or this server to the domain, by change setting and change, and tell him the domain it will be meu.local, and then use my domain admin account to join this server to the domain. So now I use my domain admin account, and then we can see after joining the server we will see the different group policies applied, the background, the login script, all we have done in the previous videos. We will see it now, and we will also see the different department shares mapped and my user home directory folder. All of this we will see it. You can see also that the keyboard will be added, the time will be changed, this is the welcome screen, so the group policy is working, or the welcome message. And then we will access using our Active Directory or my Active Directory user account. There's also a best practice, as I said before, to put the file server not on a domain controller, and also the DHCP should be as a best practice not to put it on the domain controller. Okay, you can put it separately, or you can, for best practice, to have two DHCPs or to have DHCP failover, but do not put a lot of roles on the domain controller. So you don't have one domain controller, you have DHCP, DNS, file server, all on one domain controller. So best practice to have a server for the domain controller, this is good, and you can have additional domain controller, okay, or second domain controller. You can put on the second domain controller the file server role, you can put the DHCP, so you can balance your roles. Do not put all of your eggs in one basket, okay. So do not put, for example, you can have for example, two DHCPs on two domain controllers, okay, or you can have the DHCP as a separate server member or member server, and the file server to be also as a separate member server. So you can have a domain controller and additional domain controller, you can put file server on it or DHCP, or you can have a member server as a DHCP, or a separate server as a DHCP, and a separate server as a file server. Here we can see, just a moment, we can see that this is my user home directory. So see, we can have a limit or quota limit of 2 GB. It is named according to my Active Directory username, the one that I've logged in for a couple of seconds. It is giving an L letter. Here we can see this is the department share of the IT. It's called Information Technology Info, and this is giving M, and I have a quota of 10 GB. Okay, this 10 GB I share it with all of the other departments, okay, by the way. So this is not also best practice. You need to have separate, you can give separate quota limits to every department share, and this is need to know information. This department share for all of the departments to use it. So the IT, the accounting, the HR, they have all one share, they can share general information on it. So need to know information, it's an O. This is the general share for all of the departments, okay. So every department will have its own department share, and this is a general department share for all of the departments, okay. And we can see that there is a limit, and then we can see also that this PC has been or appeared on my desktop, and it is named EDMF instead of this PC. So this is done through the PowerShell script, and it's already working. and the only thing missing in the script is the so let's continue our lab. Here we restarted the PC to complete we have joined this server to the domain, and we can see that most of the group policies are implemented. The login script is implemented, okay, except for the keyboard or the keyboard layout for the English and Arabic languages. This will appear after the second restart, which we have done now. So just wait for a moment. So now we can see that here is the Cairo local time. It's 9:12 p.m. okay, and this is the correct time, and we can see that the Cortana is hidden, which is like a glass magnifier. And if we wait for a couple of seconds, we can see, or we will see, that the keyboard of Arabic and English will be installed. If we can do this, okay, you can see here is the English and Arabic layout. So the login script is implemented, the background is implemented, most of the group policies are implemented, and the login script. So what we will do now, we will shut down the MBAM server and the first domain controller, and then we will take a snapshot from the first domain controller, which is EDMF01. We will take a screenshot, or we'll take a snapshot. This is like something like a backup for the virtual machine, and then we will take also a snapshot from the MBAM server, which is called EDMF02. We will also take a snapshot or a checkpoint. So we will take a checkpoint from the first domain controller, which is EDMF01, and we will name it before MBAM, or before installing MBAM software. And we will take also, or we make a checkpoint from the second server, or the second virtual machine, which is now acting as a member server. We will take a checkpoint, and we will call it before installing MBAM software. So a checkpoint or a snapshot, a checkpoint in Hyper-V, a snapshot in VMware workstation. A checkpoint is something like a backup of the virtual machine. So before installing the MBAM software, I have took 2 checkpoints for the 2 virtual machines I have. So if there is any problem, I can return back or revert if there is any problem. So this is all for this video. In the upcoming video, we'll begin preparing or installing or beginning the installation of the programs or the prerequisites before installing the MBAM software. So before installing the MBAM software, we need to have a couple of programs and a couple of tweaks to be done. So before that, we need to install it, and then after that we will install the MBAM. So I hope this video is informative from you all, and see you all the next video. Thank you for viewing. Thank you.